Welcome to another edition of Billiards Digest Live. Team USA's Mosconi Cup hopes got a huge boost this week, and we'll hear from Team USA's newest player. Politics invade the pro pool world and what it means for the sport, and all the latest happenings on the pro pool circuit. All that and more on this episode of Billiards Digest Live.
Welcome to what promises to be a wild ride here on this episode of Billiards Digest Live. I'm Mike Pinozzo. This is Jason Bowman. Jason, we got a lot to talk about today, don't we?
That we do. A lot happening on the table, a lot happening off the table, all leading up to this big bonanza we call the Mosconi Cup about 8 weeks away.
Well, we'll start with the biggest shocker of the year, maybe of the decade. Monday, Matchroom dropped the news that Russian native Feder Gor, the top-ranked player on Matchroom's World 9-Ball Tour, and at the time, the presumptive winner of the second automatic spot for Team Europe in the 2023 Mosconi Cup, was instead awarded the second automatic spot on Team USA. So let that sink in for a minute. Feder Gor representing Team USA in the Mosconi Cup. Matchroom's release stated that the big switch was the result of Gorst's recently granted permanent residency in the United States. Gorst has been living in the U.S. since February of 2022 and has both embraced and been embraced by the country's pool community, saying, "I felt like I was truly home." The unprecedented move vaulted Gorst ahead of Shane Van Boening into the second of the three automatic spots allocated to each team based on those World 9-Ball Tour points. Jason, not surprisingly, this news, blew
Shocker.
up pool's face in social media, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I woke up Monday morning, I've got this bad habit. My wife gets on me. I got this bad habit of looking at my cell phone before I get out of bed. And 6:30 in the morning, Monday morning, I open up my phone and look at my emails. I got a press release from Matchroom, and it's talking about David Al-Kaidi and Feder Gor being named to the Mosconi Cup. And I just kind of ho-hum thinking, of course, another world beaters added to Team Europe. Nothing to see too exciting here. And then it dawns on me that there's nothing about Team USA. So I open it back up and I'm reading and I realize, holy cow, this is huge. And suddenly I'm wide awake. I'm out of bed. I'm scrolling social media. The few people that were up at that early hour starting to talk about it, right? The news was obviously released overnight. But, then I thought back to, a week or so ago, you and I were talking and I asked you, why hasn't there been this announcement yet about Shane being named to Team USA?
Right.
And we didn't really know why or if that had been overlooked.
It was supposed to be an automatic bid based on the results of the
US Open, right.
At that time, all indications said that Shane was Team USA's number 2 and Feder was Team Europe's number 2.
Yeah, and Matchroom doesn't overlook something big like that.
No.
So, we should have realized at the time that something big was in the works. And as you said, perhaps the biggest shocker since Johan Reisink changed sides from Team Europe to Team USA, because I can't recall a bigger development with the Mosconi Cup than this news.
Yeah, well, you saw it come out. We saw all the knee-jerk reaction in social media. Most of it positive, some of it negative, but then when you sit down and kind of let it sink in, you're thinking, okay, what does this mean for Team USA?
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting scenario because, like you said, Feder Gor has been a man without a country since February of 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, he was forced to, he was basically banned by the WPA from participating in sanctioned events because all Russian players were. Right. He was here in the United States playing where he could, Derby City and a few other events. But just really a remarkable change of events when you're talking about a player that was poised to take that number 2 slot on a stacked Team Europe.
Right.
And suddenly we take him and put him on the Team USA side, and suddenly our future looks a lot more bright.
It does. I mean, if you push through does he belong on Team USA? Does he not belong? I pushed through that really pretty quickly and was into okay, how do I like my chances now in December?
Yeah, for me, I kind of went back and looked at, the World Baseball, I'm a baseball guy, the World Baseball Classic, they had that this past spring, and I went back, because I know a lot of players in that will play on different countries,
right.
and, I thought, what's the criteria for that? And I went back and looked, and it's basically, if you're born there, if you're a citizen there, or if you have permanent residency in a country, you can play. And so once Feder got that permanent residency, it seemed like it worked. It works out for everybody. Works really well for Team
really
USA
well
and our
for
fans.
Team USA.
Maybe not as well for a few hopefuls for Team USA. And I know we're going to talk more about that.
Right.
But overall, I'm a fan of Team USA. And as a fan of Team USA, it's hard not to love what's happened here, because now you've got, again, to borrow a baseball analogy, you got 3 number 1 starters with Sky, Feder Gor, and soon to be named Shane Van Boening, probably after the Hanoi Open.
Yeah,
So
it's changed the dynamic for Team USA, not only this year, but going forward, because the release that came out of Matchroom said, like you said, either born in a country, have dual citizenship, or have permanent residency.
Right.
And that permanent residency is what allowed Feder Gor to qualify in the new Matchroom protocol.
The October 1st drafted rules, so they are new rules, but hey, rules are rules, and they're theirs to make. So
obviously that he wanted it to happen, and they helped make it happen. And Feder, as we speak, Feder is in Vietnam playing in the Hanoi Open, and he was kind enough to join us to share his thoughts on the big news. So let's hear what he had to say. What could be more American than mom, apple pie, and Feder Gor, right? So here we are. It's coming to us live from Vietnam is the newest member of Team USA for the Mosconi Cup, Feder Gor. Feder, how you doing?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing good. Great.
You're in Vietnam, starting the Hanoi Open. You're just coming off winning the Perry Open. You must be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, feeling really good. It's been a long trip already. I mean, it's only been 5 days, or whatever it was, 6 days here, but it feels like way longer. So I came right after the U.S. Open, finishing second there, and hopped on the flight to Hanoi, and basically had events back to back, which kind of helped me, because I feel like playing back to back helps me being on stroke, and I like it. But also, the keeping the energy level on the same level is a tough thing to do when you're flying, changing hotels and different time zones, and have to play a lot of matches. The schedule is kind of brutal too. But yeah, I'm really happy that I won that tournament.
So, again, a lot going on in a short period of time. All of a sudden, news drops that Feder Gor is playing for Team USA in the 2023 Mosconi Cup. And social media went tilt, as you well know. So tell me a little bit about your reason for wanting to play on Team USA.
So, as we all know, from February of last year, I've been living in the United States, and that's where my base is. I'm traveling to all the tournaments from Indiana, from Memphis, Indiana. That's where I'm based in the U.S. And, I felt like I was adopted by the American fans, and the reception from the fans in the United States that I received, they've welcomed me everywhere I went, and especially the last U.S. Open I've had, the finals and the semifinals, everything that we played on the main TV table, all the fans were cheering for me, and I felt like that was like my hometown tournament. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think it would be fair for me to represent the United States going forward.
So tell me then about the actual timeline. How did when did the idea of actually talking to Matchroom about playing for the USA first come up? Did you bring it up first? Did they bring it up to you? How long ago was that? I mean, give me a little bit about the timeline of how all this took place.
You know, I always was wondering if I could represent the United States, because that was my the thing that I wanted to do in future, but I didn't know how soon I can do it, and I didn't have the green card. I was still in the process. I couldn't travel, so there was a lot of things that I was unsure of. But during U.S. Open, everything just clicked together, and I received a news from my lawyer that I got approved for a green card, and I actually got it in the mail. So I almost immediately, went to Matchroom and asked if there is a possibility for me to represent the U.S. in their tournaments, and that's how it all happened.
Again, you at that point, you were number 2 in the rankings for Team Europe. You were almost certainly going to make, well, you did technically make Team Europe at the end of the U.S. Open. So again, if you knew that was going to happen, you were going to be on Team Europe, what made you go to Matchroom and say, I'd rather play for USA?
Because that's the move that I wanted to do for
the long term,
a kind of long period of time. There you go. Like we had that picture before. I remember that.
It looks good, buddy.
That's actually like my hometown tournament now, Derby City Classic.
Right.
You go to Derby City Classic, everybody in the crowd, I know almost every person.
Okay. So tell me about the reaction that you've gotten from U.S. I know the reaction from U.S. fans has been very positive, but what have you heard from other players, U.S. players? Have you talked to other U.S. players there in Hanoi? There are a lot of them there. A lot of the ones who were chasing points that now all of a sudden a spot for them is missing. Do you kind of feel for them at all? Have you talked to them at all? Who have you spoken to, and what's been the reaction? What's been the response?
Honestly, I have been really busy. I haven't opened my Facebook to read all the comments, so I don't know if the news made the positive reactions or negative. I was playing the Perry Open finals yesterday night, and they made the announcement right before the finals, which was a little bit crazy for me, because I thought that it would be after I'm done playing. But I had to turn off the notifications on my phone, and this morning I already started playing in another tournament, Hanoi Open. So I haven't had a chance to talk with with the guys, with the players, but I think they will understand my point of view.
And do you understand their point of view as being maybe a little bit caught off guard, maybe a little bit upset that after being in the European points rankings all year, all of a sudden you're on Team USA? It affected a lot of them who were chasing those final spots. Do you empathize with them?
I mean, if I say no, of course that would be a lie. I feel. I mean, I don't feel like guilty, if that's the right word.
No, right. I don't expect that. Yeah. Have you spoken to Jeremy Jones?
Not actually, not a lot, because he was busy commentating my matches, and I was busy playing, and the Vietnamese fans here, they're very passionate, and I've took probably, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, at least 500-600 pictures the last 2 days, and signed I don't know how many cases, cue balls, and badges. The fans are very, very crazy here.
Yeah. So understandably, with a tournament going on, and Jeremy busy and you busy and the other American players all still fighting for spots on Mosconi and trying to win a tournament. What do you think the plan will be going forward as far as you getting together with Jeremy, getting together with some of those players and sitting down and just talking about, okay, this is where we're at, what's the best way to go forward? Do you have a plan?
Honestly, I'm curious about it because we didn't have that discussion yet, but I'm pretty sure we will because it's already October and it's two months before the tournament and there won't be much time after all the tournaments are done. The schedule is still kind of busy. After this tournament, we have another one, and then we go back to the U.S. And then we have the International Open and tournaments in Puerto Rico. So we have a busy schedule, but I think what we will need to do is get together and figure out timing when we can start practicing together and starting building that chemistry.
Okay. So how much are you looking forward to walking into that 2,500, 3,000 seat arena in London, arm in arm with Shane Van Boening and Skylar Woodward and whoever else ends up on Team USA wearing the red, white, and blue?
I mean, I'm super excited. I think it's great for everyone. I mean, it's gonna be tough on me, I think, because 95% of the fans will be Europeans probably, and I will be getting a lot of boos from the fans, sure. And the press conference is going to be wild. But I will tell you one thing: in my opinion, the American side will be the favorite this year on paper.
Well, that's throwing a lot of pressure on yourself right away, but I love that. And certainly Sky and Shane can fill you in on what it's like playing in Alley Pally because it is 95% European fans and they are very vocal. So you can buckle up and get ready for that. But I'm sure you're going to handle the pressure well. We're excited to have you on Team USA. I mean, this is, we kind of made fun of it and talked about it all year long, right? About it being, Feder should play for Team USA. But I don't think anybody really thought that it would happen. Certainly not this quickly. So it's certainly going to make things really interesting between now and December. And it certainly does make Team USA a much stronger team than it was a week ago. So we look forward to seeing you there, Feder. Thank you very much for joining us. Good luck at the Hanoi Open, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, take care.
Yep, bye.
You gotta love the bold prediction from Feder Gor there. I mean, he's a confident, great young player. What was your takeaway?
Obviously I love the confidence, and what is Feder? 24, 25?
23.
Just really well-spoken young man, and what I loved, what we learned there is, he put this into motion by going to Matchroom. We joked about it earlier this year on a show, one of our shows, when we had Feder on, but that was more parody than seriousness. And, obviously he's thought about this quite a bit, because there's some pretty significant ramifications potentially for him. I mean, one, you're leaving Team Europe, who was a heavy favorite before this change. But you also have to understand Federer's Russian born. He's from Russia. They have an authoritative regime. They've got almost a dictatorship over there. He has family still in Russia.
Right.
For him to basically become, a resident of the United States, to represent Team USA, that's a big decision for a very young man.
It is.
And you can see he seems to appreciate not only what that means for him, but what it means for Team USA, for our fans, and I think he's very genuine.
Yeah, I don't look at this as a lark at all. I think this is a very serious thing to him. I think he takes pride in living here now and living here now. I think he wants to represent the U.S. It just got accelerated beyond what we ever thought was possible,
Absolutely.
Right? I also was interested. It was interesting what he said about, the impact that it had on other players looking for a spot.
Sure.
I think he understands their situation, but he said, like I said, I'm not going to say I feel guilty about it because this is, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to play. I consider myself part of the U.S. family now, and this is where I want to play. The other players, for the U.S. that are in Hanoi, and there's a bunch of them.
Right.
A couple of them have responded to Feder being named, and they took the high road. I'm sure at the beginning it stung. I'm sure it caught them off guard. They had, watched Federer's name on the European list all year, and then all of a sudden they're playing for one less spot. So what you saw was comments from BJ Ussery. There was a comment from Oscar Dominguez, all very positive about Federer being on the team and going forward. And these are guys who traveled all the way to Vietnam to play in that tournament, and 3 spots quickly became 2.
Right.
Right. So Shane Van Boening is pretty much a lock for that 3rd automatic spot. So now there's 2 guys playing for wildcard spots. You've got Shane Wolford, Tyler Steyer, Oscar Dominguez, Billy Thorpe, BJ Ussery, all over there playing. So essentially they're auditioning for those 2 wildcard spots. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it's tough when you have something that is so positive for so many people, and I think it's kind of unanimous amongst Team USA fans. But you're right, there's this small segment of players fighting it out for those last couple slots. This is really significant, right? Because there's one less spot out there. But the great thing for these guys is, like you said, almost all of them that are in contention are in Hanoi.
Right.
They have an opportunity before them this week, right now, to make a statement. One thing we know about going over to Ali Pali and playing in London, you got to be ready to deal with some adversity.
Right.
And this is a great example of some adversity that they're facing. They're all the way over in Vietnam. They get hit with this news. What else can you do but go out and show Jeremy Jones, who's also in Hanoi, that you're ready and you're gonna do what it takes to be on this team.
Yeah.
So in some respects, I do understand there might be a little bit of a frustration there, but I believe they still all have the opportunity before them, and it's up to them now to make the most of it.
It is up to them to make the most of it. I've given some thought to, if I'm Jeremy Jones in this situation, 1, I'm loving having Feder Gor on my team. 2, my decision on those wild cards becomes, a little tougher. I've given thought to, if I was Jeremy Jones, would I publicly announce that whoever gets that number 4 spot into points is my first wild card pick, as a way of rewarding these guys for making those type of trips and finishing essentially 3rd into points? Would that be a good reward? Or does he just fly by the seat of his pants on his last 2 picks? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's tough to say what Jeremy will do, but he's a sensible guy, and I think it makes sense. There were so many players close to that 3rd spot, now the 4th spot, in terms of points that, if I'm the captain of Team USA, I'm looking at the end of the year, who's playing the best. Right? We are at the end of the year. Who's going to step up in Hanoi and make a deep run in that tournament, and make a statement, right? So I think these players are going to make it easy on him. I tend to like not only players that are playing well at the end of the year, but players that have some experience. So, if Shane Wolford's going to hold on to a spot, which I think he's probably the one that was affected the most, at least based on where the standings were, need to see something from him in Hanoi, that we did not see necessarily at the U.S. Open. He missed a couple of the big matchroom events this year. So, if he wants that spot, I want to see him make a deep run in Vietnam.
Well, you saw from those rankings that Shane is pretty comfortably in that number 3 spot. So if you look at that,
Shane Van Boening. Right.
So you look at those 4 and 5 spots. There was Shane Wolford right there, Tyler Steyer right there, Billy Thorpe right there, BJ Ussery right there. I mean, they're $3,000 apart, $4,000 apart. So there's everything to play for those, 5. Oscar's close behind. So there's just everything to play for those guys. And yeah, I want to see them, go tooth and nail as deep as they can and see who's performing best. And then if you're Jeremy Jones, you can look over that list and make your decision from there. Give me your prediction.
I think Tyler Steyer's in, just based on his history at the Mosconi Cup, his success. He's been on 2 winning teams. He's obviously right there in points. And then it comes down to, Shane, BJ, Billy, or Oscar. If I'm picking from that group, I'm looking at who's playing well, and I'll go back to the U.S. Open. It's the most recent tournament we had.
Right.
Oscar Dominguez finishes top 32 there, the highest rated of those players. He also has quite a bit of Mosconi experience. The thing about playing in Ali Pali in London is, like Feder said, like you said, it is a crazy, crazy crowd, and I don't think you can be ready for it until you've actually done it. So,
Right.
you know, for me, it's probably between Billy and Oscar if I'm picking. And I like Oscar's calmness, demeanor. I like his team chemistry. I know he hasn't been playing as many of the events, but I want to see what he does in Hanoi, right? Because again, I think that's is going to be the determining factor.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick today and I'm picking the team, those are my 5. I'm taking the big 3, and then I'm taking Tyler, and Oscar is my 5th.
Well, I'm with you on Tyler Steyer. I like, you know, his calmness, his temperament at the table. He's been in that Ali Pali crowd before. He actually played very well this year, although the points don't quite show it relative to the other players. But I like his style. With my 5th spot, you know, unless he fails miserably in Hanoi, I'm probably going to take a flyer on Shane Wolford and get a rookie in there and get him some experience, because you need that going forward. Shane Wolford is one of our players for the
Looking
future.
ahead,
That's pretty obvious. So you want to get him in there with those players and get him to feel a little more comfortable playing with them and get used to this kind of crowd. So you've got a little more room to play with this year, knowing that your top 3 are Shane, Sky, and Feder.
Right.
So you've got a little more wiggle room there to maybe, you know, not go off the wall with an experiment, but to take a flyer on it.
Yeah. So, well, I hope you're right. I really do hope Shane Wolford steps up and we see some big results from him in Hanoi. But since you asked me for a prediction, I'm going to throw one at you, and that is we get into the Mosconi Cup. We're tied going into the final day, 11-11. Comes down to the captain pick.
Shane
right?
Wolford. Shane Wolford, come on.
One player to win it all. Jeremy Jones has to decide. You know, who do you throw up there? Is it Feder? Probably the top player in the world? Is it Sky, the top Mosconi player on Team USA, or is it the Mr. Reliable Shane Van Boening?
Yeah, I think if you're Jeremy Jones, you're going to look and see who's been playing well the last 2 days. That has a lot to do with it. You want to have the guys who have confidence in themselves. Yeah. You want to have the guys that you know that the team feels confident in. That being said, I think if they were all playing equal footing, I think he would give the first shot to Shane to say yes or no.
Okay.
That would be my prediction. So you know, it's going to be a really interesting. It's going to be an interesting event, and it's already been an interesting event.
It has.
Social media wise, I mean, everybody's gone berserk on social media over this whole thing. Everybody's got their opinions. Everybody's voiced in. There's been a lot of fun on social media because the new rules for Matchroom stipulate that if you have permanent residency in a country, you can play, right? So all of a sudden, there was call-outs for Jason Shaw and Darren Appleton and Mika Immonen and Torsten Holman and John Mora and whoever else. You know, there's going to be a lineup of Europeans coming to the U.S. trying to get green cards because they can make the team. So, but social media has been buzzing, and let's go to our girl Becky and find out what's been going on a response to all this happening with Feder Gor.
Hey guys, so like you guys said, the response that we've seen on social media has been overwhelmingly positive so far. So I went ahead and pulled a couple of comments for you guys to share with you guys. The first one being from Andrea. She says, "I'm so excited about his decision to play for Team USA." Aaron says, "To be fair, if Feder embodies the values of USA and seeing how much he loves staying in the States, it's not a bad thing either." Another one from Christian, he says, "Yet he refuses to join my APA team." Sorry, Christian. Hate to crush your dreams here, but don't think that one's happening. And then the last one I've got here from Joe, he says, "I don't want to see SVB and Shaw be doubles partners." So, what do you guys think about that one?
Well, Jason Shaw was one of the people who did post, a poster of him wearing a Team USA
He got creative
jersey,
with Photoshop there, didn't he?
He did Photoshop himself in, and Jason lives in the U.S., is married, lives here, and has a pool room in the Northeast. And but if there's one person that I don't think ever wants to play for Team USA, it's Jason Shaw, because no one has been more vocal in years past about hating Team USA and wanting to crush them every year than Jason Shaw.
They might burn down Ali Pally in London if Jason Shaw dons an American jersey over there. So
Yeah, good stuff.
we'll stick with Feder and let Jason end up on Team Europe. Speaking of Team Europe, obviously big ramifications with the switch. I mean, we've talked a lot about how this impacts Team USA, but big impact on Team Europe.
Yeah, well, we definitely have to look at how this affects Team Europe. The primary beneficiary of the bold move to put Gorst on Team USA was Spain's David Alcaide. Embroiled in a close battle for third automatic spot, Alcaide suddenly found himself the grateful recipient of the number 2 spot, leaving a host of other European hopefuls to battle it out in Hanoi for the final automatic spot on Team Europe. Now take a look at the current points list for Team Europe, and you'll see a real logjam. 6 players separated by $5,000. There's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching in Hanoi, right? You can see there that, you've got Jason Shaw, Mario He, Eklund Kachi, Joshua Filler, Moritz Neuhausen, Alexa Pacel. It's whoever finishes highest in Hanoi is getting that number 3rd spot.
Yeah, and I would expect, regardless of the outcome in Hanoi, Jason Shaw, as we mentioned, is likely to be picked for Team Europe, whether that's through points or the wild card. You saw Mario He, who, interestingly enough, if you remember back to 2018, was selected, the only time he's been selected for the team, but was banned due to WPA rule on a certain substance he was taking. With some of his medication that basically ruled him ineligible. So
yeah, it was a heartbreaking event, and he's had a tough time getting over it ever since, and he's been killing himself to get on Mosconi ever since. He's one of the guys that I really root for to make one of those spots.
Yeah, it would be great to see him. You saw Kachi up at the top. Of course, he had the serious injury a few months back, already back to playing, but he's not going to be at the Hanoi Open, right?
He posted on social media photographs of him at the airport, said his plane got turned around, had to go back to the airport. It ended up getting scrapped. He ended up getting grounded and not being able to leave for Hanoi. So that was a real shame because he had been playing the best of all the Europeans so far this year. And you could tell he really wanted to make it to come back this quickly and make an effort to get to Hanoi. So you feel bad for him. Then you've got, Moritz Neuhausen, very young kid. Just won one of the smaller ranking events in Connecticut, and he's got a chance. So really, it's whoever finishes highest in Hanoi has really got the catbird seat on that number 3 spot.
Yeah, conspicuously absent from this conversation thus far, and on that list is one Josh Filler, who we know is a Mosconi warrior. And we're going to talk more about his situation, but at this point, again, he's not in Hanoi either, and looks like he may be out of the mix this year. And again, we're going to get into more of that.
We will get into that.
As I look at the 2 teams, and again, we don't know the 4th and 5th players for Team USA. We know Shane Van Boening will be there at number 3. We have some assumptions on, either Mario He or Jason Shaw at number 3 for Team Europe. But as far as our top 3, I mean, I like our top 3 against any top 3 they put out there. It's going to be FSR, David Alcaide, and one of these other top players. But I'll take our top 3. I don't know where we'll stack up on the 4 and 5 against them, but again, really promising. Really promising for this year's Mosconi Cup if you're a Team USA fan.
It's going to be fun. It's
Absolutely.
going to be a lot of fun. Of course, there's been a lot of tournament action leading up to the Hanoi Open, which is underway in Vietnam. The granddaddy of them all, the U.S. Open, was at the top of the list. 256 players made their way to Harrah's Resort in Atlantic City for the 46th running of America's oldest major professional tournament, and it did not disappoint. There were plots and subplots all over the Harrah's Ballroom Arena. After 4 days, the field had been whittled down to a final 16 that did not include the World 9-Ball Tour's top 2 players, defending champion Francisco Sanchez Ruiz and 5-time U.S. Open winner Shane Van Boening. Ruiz was eliminated by Poland's Daniel Maciol, and Van Boening was ousted by Chung-Lin Jiang of Taiwan in the final 64. By the quarterfinals, former U.S. Open winners Ralph Souquet, Carlo Beato, and Josh Filler were all gone. Also out was America's last hope, Sky Woodward. Not that the semifinals were void of big names and rising stars. Feder Gor was in beast mode in search of his first U.S. Open. as was former world 10-ball champion Ping Chung Ko of Taiwan. Joining them was 23-year-old Serbian Alexa Pexel and 2021 U.S. Open runner-up Aloysius Yap of Singapore. And that's when the magic really started. The 23-year-old Gorst, who won the World 9-Ball Championship as a 19-year-old in 2019, broke open a tight match against Pexel, winning the final 5 racks to secure an 11-6 win and reach his first U.S. Open final. Pexel's semifinal finish, however, vaulted him into Mosconi Cup contention. But it was the 28-year-old Ko who left the U.S. Open crowd stunned and slack-jawed with a performance for the ages in his semifinal match against Yap. The tiny Taiwanese ace broke 11 times, with the one ball racing into the side pocket on every occasion, and successfully deposited all 99 balls in an 11-0 win over the powerless Yap. It was as close to perfection as a match can be, leaving even Ko a little embarrassed by his dominance. Yap, who didn't pocket a single ball, took the beating in stride. When asked afterwards how many balls he pocketed, the good-natured Singaporean replied, "Well, I made 9 during my practice rack." In the finale, Ko was only slightly less dominating. Trailing 6-3 against the determined Gorst, Ko went on another patented run, this time winning 10 straight games to win 13-6 and claim the U.S. Open title. Here you can see the final rankings from the U.S. Open with Yap and Pexel tied for 3rd, Robbie Capito, Jason Shaw, Max Lechner, Victor Zelinsky, the players who finished tied for 5th. So Jason, a lot going on there.
Little Ko coming
Little
up
Ko.
big at the U.S. Open. That's my headline there. Really impressive, like you said, dominating, impressive perfection, right?
His match against Yap was just mind-blowing. I mean, he made every single ball in 11 racks.
Yeah.
And Yap didn't miss any balls. He got to the table once or twice in a kick situation or something like that, but Ko was just magical, and it was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, well, congratulations to him. Now to we had some American players that fared pretty well as well at the U.S. Open. We had 9 players get into that top 64.
That was a great
Shane
performance,
Earl, you had Billy and Tyler, BJ Useri, and Jeremy Sosi. Oscar and Chris Reinhold both make it to the round of 32.
Right.
So again, a good performance there by Oscar, coming on strong late. Sky, as you mentioned, made it to the final 16. The one player that, again, we would hope that we had seen a little bit better performance from, Shane Wolford, does not make the round of 64 there. So
Right.
again, he needs to have some have a good run here at the Hanoi
I
Open.
think he does need to step it up. For me, being an old-timer, we saw the picture of Earl there and Shane playing at the same time under the U.S. flag. Earl's performance at the U.S. Open was special.
Yeah.
He went in there, he played so hard. He was gracious, his temperament was good. He can still pocket balls with anybody. It was fun to watch him play there. He lost a heartbreaker to Ralph Soke, another Hall of Famer. It was like old Mosconi Cup days. And then he got eliminated by Jason Shaw.
Yeah, his old roommate, right?
His old roommate
His old
in New York when
roommate. Thanks
Jason
a
first
lot.
came to the U.S. So, yeah, but having 9 Americans make the final 64 was a good
showing,
statement. It was a
yeah.
good showing. It's something that we talked about earlier in the year is, you know, 5 guys are going to make Mosconi Cup. You want to see guys just perform better on the international stage than they did the previous year. You want to see growth. You want to see some progress made, and I think we've seen that a lot this year.
Absolutely.
Of course, after the U.S. Open, the players, a lot of them parted ways, with a number of them traveling to Qatar for the Qatar Open, while others headed directly to Vietnam to play in the Perry Open, a World 9-Ball Tour ranking event immediately ahead of the Hanoi Open. There, Gorst went on another run, this time rolling unbeaten to the title in a 128-player field loaded with the top Asian players. Along the way, Gorst topped Filipino stars Dennis Orcolo and Anton Raga, and in the title match, defeated yet another Philippine star, Michael Feliciano, 13-6. The $25,000 win moved Gorst into the #1 spot on the World 9-Ball Tour's money list for 2023. Here we can see the results from the Perry Open. Niels Fan, Che Wei Fu, Francisco Sanchez Ruiz, Po Chang Kwao finishing 5th through 8th, with the 2 Filipinos tied for 3rd. Of course, attention now turns to Hanoi Open, which will conclude this weekend and can be viewed on the Matchroom Live Facebook page and on Matchroom's YouTube channel. Meanwhile, the return to the Qatar Open 9-ball championship after a 5-year hiatus brought 128 players to the wealthy Arabian Peninsula, including U.S. Open winner Ping Chung Ko and recent China Open winner Josh Filler. Incredibly, Filler limped into the final 64 after losing his second-round match against relatively unknown Turkish player Sami Koylu, 9-6. But the German star rattled off 6 consecutive do-or-die wins to reach the final, taking down the likes of fellow German Torsten Hohmann, Poland's Viktor Zielinski, and Simon Corral, and Greece's Alex Kazakis. Standing in his way in the final was the red-hot Ping Chung Ko, who was looking to bring his 2-week winnings total to a cool $100,000. But it was Filler who controlled the match, finishing with a 13-9 victory. Here you can see the final standings from the Qatar Open, with John Mora of Canada finishing tied for third with Corral, Kazakis, Dennis Grabi of Estonia, Badr Alawadi, and Carlo Beato finishing 5th to 8th. A lot going on.
Definitely a lot going on there in Qatar, and but pool was not the only game being played, right? Big news coming out of Qatar over the weekend. You want to fill us in on all the happenings there? Some politics invading the pool world.
Politics was also on the agenda in Qatar, with the World Pool Association, or WPA, holding its annual General Assembly during the 9-ball event. And one order of business was voting on a response to Matchroom's decision at the end of 2022 to not sanction its events with the world governing body. For the uninitiated, the WPA was formed in the late 1980s as part of an effort to unite the sport worldwide and eventually gain membership into the International Olympic Committee. It's part of the WCBS, which includes pool, snooker, and carom billiards, and its membership is made up of continental federations. Each of the continental members oversees national federations on its continent. Because of its eventual acceptance as a member of the IOC, many of these national federations, WPA, receive government funding to develop the sport and athletes, including sending athletes to competitions that are sanctioned by the WPA. According to the WPA, Matchroom's running of major events around the world and drawing players from countries around the world without sanctioning undermines the association's ability to govern the sport through its national federations. With the escalation of major pool events around the globe and dates of sanctioned and non-sanctioned events clashing, the WPA voted in Qatar to begin suspending players who participate in non-sanctioned events starting in March 2024, essentially forcing the world's players to make a choice between WPA events and Matchroom events. You still with me?
It's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to peel back, but you know, the ramifications are huge. And like you said, this kind of was set in motion back at the end of last year. Of course, Mosconi Cup here in Las Vegas last year, the announcement comes out from Matchroom that they're no longer going to sanction their events with the WPA. Moving into 2023. You know, they're continuing to schedule more and more events. The calendar's filling up, and suddenly you start to see some date conflicts arise, right? Players going to this event and not that event, and so these are the things that are starting to, I guess, set in motion what happens in Qatar, which is now the threat of this ban that's apparently going to take effect in 6 months. It is interesting to me that, you know, they came out and made this statement, but they kind of kicked the can down the road saying, well, 6 months from now is when this will happen. You know, to me, it speaks to they're still probably hoping for some compromise. I mean, the WPA, you know, outside of their federations where they do have strength in terms of their players, especially the ones that are helping subsidize and fund the players, you know, this is their hand. This is their play. This is their only real play.
This is
and
where
they've done it now.
Strength.
Right.
They have to show their strength.
And so, you know, I just think ultimately we've already seen a number of players come out and against what the WPA has done here. So they, you know, at this point they kind of look like the bad guy. But, you know, ultimately the players are going to suffer here. The WPA is going to suffer here, and I believe Matchroom to some extent will suffer as well when it comes to these major fields they like to put together for these
no doubt
events
about it. No doubt about
across
it.
the globe.
Yeah, it's a deal where, the WPA is trying to show what kind of strength it has and that it can hurt Matchroom and Matchroom events by taking away some players who are beholden to their federations. And part of that is we look at Matchroom go into places like Germany, and we look at them go into places like Spain, and the field's 256 players. Well, the bottom 128 of those is traditionally, and it's the same here in the U.S. Open, is national players who will go ahead and pony up and take their swings for, $400,
Sure.
$500 to see how they do in this tournament.
Yeah.
But those players, primarily in countries like Germany, especially, they're all part of that German federation. So are they going to risk their standing in that federation to go 2-0 in the European Open?
Right.
Probably not. So we've seen it impact the Hanoi Open in Vietnam, where I think up to 70 players, Vietnamese and other Asian players, pulled out late in the game because of the threat of reprisal. Right. So it's not a good sign from that standpoint. This is where the WPA strength is. WPA strength isn't really in the WPA. The strength is in its national federations within the big continents.
Right.
And Asia and Europe are the strongest federations. They have federations that really do control player movement. It's not good for those players.
Right.
They're to me they're keeping them back from being the best they can be, which is what their national programs did a good job of helping develop great young players. The player base in Europe is as deep as you can imagine. We look at Mosconi Cup rankings. There are 16 European players ranked higher than third place on the American money list.
Wow.
Okay, so they come to play, but
Yeah.
give them the opportunity to play. Let them play in these events. You've built them to this certain level. Let the birds fly.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot on the screen here. You've seen a lot of reaction from some of the top players out there. Here in the United States, I know Sky Woodward was quick to put out a statement. Shane Van Boening basically said, come next March, I won't play any more WPA events, focusing on Matchroom events. Tyler Steyer. Here in the United States, though, the WPA doesn't do much of anything for the players, right? Through the North American Association, which is the BCA, whereas a country like Germany or Poland, some of these European countries that you mentioned, they're subsidizing these players. They're sending them to these tournaments around the globe. They're paying the entry fees, and so. Some of them have remained silent, and I think that speaks volumes as well. And this is where we talked a little bit about Josh Filler earlier, but he's one that is probably going to be very caught in the middle of this.
He is. He's obviously caught in the middle of it, and I think he's kind of showed his cards already. He played in the China Open, which was WPA. He played in the Qatar Open, which was WPA. Won both. Pulled out of Hanoi at the last minute, and instead is playing in a Euro Tour event in Slovenia right now. So I think he's kind of laid his cards on the table, and I think that's pretty obvious. I think what's also interesting to me is we've seen from the comments that the players who were quick to make a definitive statement are all behind Matchroom.
Right.
I have yet to see a single comment from anyone saying, I'm 100% WPA, go team, right?
Right.
Okay, and that's because I think that primarily, people who choose to take the WPA route at this point are doing so out of fear more than opportunity, right? And that's a real shame.
Right.
That's a real shame. But, we talked about, the U.S. and how it's going to affect players here, and the Billiard Congress of America being the North American representative. They are the North American Federation for the WPA, which happens to represent U.S. and Canada. We all know that pool most certainly does not receive funding from the government in the U.S. And with just two countries, we don't have the structure that it takes to operate on a continent like Europe or Asia. So our perspective is really quite different. And to get an idea of what took place in Qatar, we reached out to BCA CEO Shane Tyree, who also serves as the Vice President and Sports Director of the WPA, to get an insight on what took place in Qatar. Shane, as the North American representative to WPA. You were at the General Assembly meeting in Qatar. And without breaking any, non-disclosure rules or anything, what was the direction of the discussion regarding the suspension of players by federations after March 1st?
Yeah, well, first, let me just say thank you for having me on and giving me this opportunity. It wasn't an easy conversation in Qatar, that was for sure. All the continental representatives had a different perspective and input. And yes, although I don't think it's explicitly expressed in the short term, I do believe everyone involved that came to the table into discussion with what they believed was in the best interest of the sport. One of the things that really stood out to me from an American perspective is how the rest of the world views America. It was explained to me in no uncertain terms, Mike, that here in America, we play a game with players.
Right.
And in the rest of the world, they play a sport with athletes. And so we came from with a different perspective when we were there the whole time.
So what was the North American Billiard Congress of America perspective on the discussions that were taking place? What was your stance on the decisions that were being made?
So I reached out to Canada and, obviously our board of directors, the BCA in North America did not and does not support banning players. We realize how hard it is for a professional player to make a living in this sport. And we don't want to do anything to take away from their opportunities to earn a decent living. Very honestly, I believe if you go and ask the top American players, that the BCA has been fairly consistent with our messaging to them. And that is that we understand and have always advised that they need to do what's in the best interest for them and their careers.
Okay. What were, if you were taking that stance, can you tell me what your suggestions were going forward? What kind of alternatives you may have suggested? What other, things were discussed short of complete suspension of players?
Yeah, to take a step back, when I first started my professional career, my first mentor came to me and said, "Shane, you should always come to me with solutions and not problems." So from that moment forward, that's always been an underlying motivation for me and how I approach situations of work. So yes, did the BCA propose some alternatives to discuss and consider and debate? Absolutely. But since none of those alternatives were implemented, I don't really find any point in saying what those were.
Very diplomatic of you, Shane. So now but you are kind of stuck with the WPA's, decision as a federation member. So what does this mean for U.S. players going forward once they start playing in non-sanctioned events after March 1st? I mean, American players have been very quick and very decisive about their intentions. How are you guys going to handle that with our players?
Yeah, so that's definitely a tricky question. At the moment, I don't know what events are on the calendar after March 1st. So it's hard to say whom this will impact because professional players are pretty selective in the events they choose to compete. But let's say, for example, the UK Open is on March 15th, and it qualifies as a WPA sanctioned event, but is not sanctioned by the WPA. Then any player playing in that event is choosing to only play in non-sanctioned events. So moving forward, they will not be allowed to play in WPA sanctioned events within 6 months of their last participation in a non-sanctioned event. But, to think of the impact on players, I think this really impacts and we felt more from international players because of the Q Sports recognition within the IOC. Many of those international players receive governmental salaries, support, and stipends to participate in WPA sanctioned events. So how they decide will have a much larger impact on playing in non-sanctioned events versus non-sanctioned events.
Well, yeah, and that's true. I mean, certainly there are, a lot of countries in which they do get funding. There's more structure, say, than there may be in the U.S. But the U.S. players are going to suffer the same consequences, even though they don't get government funding here or federation funding here. So, what will happen when the World 8-Ball Championship comes up, or the World 10-Ball Championship, or something that's sanctioned by the WPA that gives you an allotment of spaces as the North American representative into those tournaments? Who goes?
I'll tell you the same thing I told the WPA board. From my perspective, as that happens, the BCA will be sending 14 and 15-year-olds who aren't playing in the U.S. Open and aren't playing in, matchroom events. So we're going to be sending, 14, 15-year-olds to world championships, to world games, until all this is over.
Yeah. Well, do you see a possibility that there is an over here?
I don't have a crystal ball, Mike.
I was hoping that you would. We were counting on it big time.
Maybe a magic 8-ball somewhere, but I can't answer that question.
Well, to that end, the release mentioned that there had been an effort made prior to the meeting in Qatar to find some kind of solution with Matchroom. And let's face it, that's essentially who this non-sanctioned part of the equation is pointing at. You were involved in that meeting before Qatar at the U.S. Open, I believe, with Matchroom. Can you tell me anything about that?
Yeah, I did fly out to Atlantic City during the U.S. Open to meet with Matchroom. And as we've discussed many times, I've always wanted to do everything I could to unify this industry. And I wanted to extend an olive branch to Matchroom in hopes of continuing to work together. Look, Matchroom has sanctioned events with the WPA for the past 20 years. Why all of a sudden they wanted to take their toys and play in another sandbox is beyond me.
Okay. So, we all want everyone to come back together, to coexist. Give me the argument for why Matchroom and why Pool is better if those two organizations coexist.
Yeah, this industry, like prize payouts, are just too small not to have everyone working together. If and when we can get all parties rowing in the same direction, that will only benefit the players, and it will continue to grow and stabilize this industry and sport for everyone, all parties involved.
Well, that's certainly what we all hope for. And Shane, I appreciate your coming on very much. I know you're in a tough spot. The court of public opinion is not real favorable to the WPA at this point, but I know you believe in a lot of what the value there is. So we appreciate your coming on and giving your thoughts and your insight on what took place out there. And we all hope for the best in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and let me share some of my side and the BCA's perspective. And we will continue to work for our players. As I've always said, the players give us a job. It's important that we do what we can to support them.
Well, appreciate that and good luck. And we'll talk again soon is my guess.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Well, you can tell North America was an unwilling participant in this. The stance on the unsanctioned versus sanctioned, but I really kind of felt bad for Shane during it because he's on a WPA board, but you can tell that he's not buying what they're selling.
Yeah, he looked like he was testifying before Congress there. It was a little uncomfortable. Shane is a
Federal
good guy,
Commission
stand up guy, and yeah, he's in a tough spot. Obviously communicated to us that the BCA, the North American representation, doesn't agree with the stance, but they're beholden to the group and the vote, and there's not much they can do. So the other interesting thing I heard there is, sending 14 and 15-year-olds to represent North America in world championships is, Probably not ideal in the short term for us, but maybe in the long term it's good. But again, hopefully I feel like there's a 6-month window to try to make a little more progress here, and cooler heads will prevail, and we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot of challenges facing pool right now. But one thing we can all agree on is that our resident coaching guru, Jeremy Jones, can get you ready to play in any event you choose, sanctioned or non-sanctioned. Here he is with another installment of Coach's Corner.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Jeremy Jones, and welcome to another edition of the Coach's Corner. What we're going to be going over today is basically your physical process. And what I mean by that is what we do prior to the actual motion of the swing, the start of the backswing into the downswing. So this, to me, is a huge process, a very important process. Teaching so much the last 8 years, I've seen, and I've always believed this, that what you do prior to the start of the backswing has a very direct effect on the outcome of the stroke itself. It's kind of just setting you up for success, we might say. So in a previous lesson, we've learned to aim with our stance. And we've learned in a future lesson, we'll learn about the mental process and also preparing for the shot. So I've made my decision, let's say, now this is the 9 ball, but say we had to play position on some balls. I've made my decision. And the last thing we do before the mental process kind of ends is we come look at the object ball to the hole. Now that is the start of the physical process. I'm not one that really keys on the contact point. I'm one that really wants to simply see how I want the ball to travel. Again, back to that mild information. You don't want to overload the brain. But let's get into the physical process. So once I've looked at the ball to the hole, of course, I get into my aiming with my stance, which we've gone over. But I want to skip ahead to what happens when we're actually down on the ball. And that, to me, again, is such an important thing. We're going to go over pre-strokes, both bigger ones and the micro pre-strokes. And then we're going to go into the pause of the cue ball. And then from there, we'll get into another episode about the stroke itself. But I want to stress how important these little tidbits are. So again, I'm in position. I've looked at the ball to the hole. I'm going to aim. Now I get down on the ball. Now what you'll find by most of the pros or your top or better players in your area is when we're down on the ball, of course we're in a good position, but we take a couple of pre-strokes. We don't take a lot as a whole. We usually take 1 or 2. We don't want to sit down and kind of like think long, think wrong kind of process. And mainly with the pre-strokes, what we want to feel is basically our backswing. So we do a couple of these, right? And then you'll see the pros, they'll kind of do these micro ones, which really gets into the start of the backswing. And also what the micro kind of pre-strokes do is they're kind of a bridge from the bigger pre-strokes into the pause at the cue ball. Now let's talk about the pause at the cue ball for a little bit. There's 2 pauses in the swing. The one is at the cue ball, and then you'll see a lot of players pause in the back of the backswing. So we'll get to that a little later in another episode, but as far as the pause at the cue ball, it is something that is in pretty much every sport, some form or fashion. If you've ever played golf, we waggle, and then we never go right into the swing from the waggle. We always come set with the golf club. If you've ever watched basketball, they kind of dribble and then they bounce the shoulder here. That's their pause, right? Baseball, the pitcher comes up. He has a little still moment before he gets things started. So there's always a little calm moment before the storm or the swing or the actual movement we have in each sport. So the pause in the back, I see probably 2 out of 10 pros have the pause in the back. And again, we'll talk about why that happens later in another episode. But the pause at the front, I can't say 100% of pros have it, but it's a big, big number. It's probably 90 to 95%. And it's something I think when it's skipped, I see a lot of bad things happen, even from players that normally pause at the cue ball. So again, our process, our physical process, is aiming, of course, we get down on the ball, we make a couple pre-strokes. I'm more of the 2 guy, and then these little ones to the pause. And what happens is you're setting up for a calm backswing. That's basically what we're trying to get at. Again, if you've ever watched someone golf, they don't waggle real fast. I always relate it to the guy at the free throw line. When he sets his feet, you don't see him dribble like that. We're trying to relax ourselves, calm ourselves down for a big moment of the stroke. So again, the physical process to me is very, very important. One that I always, again, bring up that's a kind of proof in the pudding. On a bet, I think if Steph Curry stood at the free throw line and I just fed him the ball, he could probably make 2 or 3 free throws in a row, 200 or 300 free throws in a row. But still, when it's game time, he goes through his process and he trusts his process. And again, we're always trying to build things we can rely on. So again, build your process. That will really help the stroke, especially when pressure situations are coming about. And you know, find your game, find your stroke, and again, pre-strokes to the pause, to the backswing.
Always great stuff from Double J, right?
Absolutely, and pretty impressive transition you had there from the WPA to the Double J's coaching corner. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Dancing as fast as I can. The tournament calendar didn't stop with the U.S. and Qatar Opens. The Predator Pro Billiards Series produced its Michigan Open Championships in late September, with both men and women competing in Battle Creek, Michigan. The men's division featured 64 players, while the women's division fielded 48. The men's division came down to a battle between Poland's Viktor Zielinski and Singapore's Aloysius Yap, who was gunning for his 3rd consecutive Michigan Open title. Surprisingly, both finalists had lost earlier matches in the event, Yap having lost to Tyler Steyer and Zielinski to fellow Pole Mieszko Fortunski. But Zielinski avenged that loss in the semifinals, then defeated Yap in straight sets 4-2 and 4-2 to claim the 10-ball title. Here you can see Feder Gor finished tied for 3rd with Fortunski, Poland's Wojciech Swajcek, Estonia's Denis Grabe, Philippines' Jovan Bustamante, and Holland's Jan van Lierop finished tied for 5th. In the women's division, the ageless Kelly Fisher continued another amazing run, stopping reigning world 9-ball champion Che Chao in 3 sets in the finale. Chao managed to steal the opening set of the final 4-1 before Fisher stormed back to claim the next 2 sets by 4-1 margins. Here you can see the final standings. Zhu Shenwei and Chihiro Kawahara finished tied for 3rd. Allison Fisher finished tied for 5th. Fisher added another title to her 2023 total the following week when she beat Margaret Fefilova-Steyer in the final of the Iron City Billiard Invitational in Birmingham, Alabama. It marked her 4th WPBA title of the year. That's a lot of action.
It is a lot of action, and some longevity in some of those names.
Yeah.
Kelly Fisher, Allison Fisher, Jasmine. I mean, just pretty remarkable to think how long they have been successful, especially when you factor in the international contingent that's really gotten involved in the WPBA. It's really impressive that they are still some of the top players out there.
Yeah, the level of play is really so high with the women right now. But, you know, when you have that, you know, Kelly Fisher, Allison Fisher come from that snooker background, their mechanics are so solid that I think that plays into their longevity, right?
Right. So everything that's gone on recently, I know you're a guy that likes to give us the facts and try to stick to the facts, but I also know you got some opinions out there. So what do you got for us this month on your spot shots?
Well, spot shots this month, you know, it still may take a little bit of time for the Feder Gor's Team USA idea to settle in, but I can't imagine what the atmosphere is going to be like at Alexandra Palace in London in December. The addition of the World 9-Ball Tour #1 immediately makes the annual transatlantic tilt a pretty even matchup. But Federer had better be ready for a rude welcome from his former Euro compatriots. It's going to be a wild scene at Ali Pali, and Gorst has already gone on record saying the Yanks are the favorites now. The thing is, this kid loves to add pressure to himself by heightening expectation. He thrives on that. Mind you, he'll learn fast that the Mosconi Cup is a different animal altogether. His only previous appearance was in 2020 when the pandemic forced the Mosconi Cup to be played without fans. So for all practical purposes, this will be Gorst's maiden voyage in the Mosconi Cup. Can he carry his new countrymen to victory? Can you imagine his standing in the U.S. pool community if he helps them win? You know, for now we can dream, right?
Yeah, you're right though. They're going to be all over him, as you know, as they will be for the rest of Team USA. But I'm guessing they'll have something special in store for Feder. But you heard him in his interview today. I mean, he's already thought about it. He has thought a lot about this decision and the impacts on him, on the team, on his participation in the Mosconi Cup, and I think he'll be ready. I think he'll be ready
too. I know that he's getting himself charged up. You can tell he's starting out of the gates fast. He's hoping he doesn't, flame out before he gets to December. But yeah, he's gonna give it his all, and it's gonna be the most anticipated Mosconi Cup in a long time.
Yeah, and the remarkable thing there too is, I think, and I didn't realize it until you said it, is he's only been on one Mosconi team, and it wasn't since the pandemic year of 2020 when there was no crowd. So it's pretty remarkable he's not been on a team.
It is, and I wonder if his decision would have been any different had he been on the last couple European
Probably so.
teams, because he thought he should have been and was left off a couple of times, and I know that left a sour taste in his mouth. So you wonder how much that played into his decision to say, I'm an American now.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the recent WPA news, the upcoming ban, and the implications on the players and the sport in general. Where do we go from where we're at today, Mike? Where are we going? Where do we go in the next 6 months? How do we get beyond this, and what happens?
Well, as the fact, where do we go from here? WPA Matchroom saga, it's not going to have any winners. Pool will not be better if one or the other of these associations' promoters crashes and burns as a result of the current impasse. Pool will lose. And as usual, the players, through no fault of their own, will also lose. For the two sides not to realize that and to not try to solve this problem before March, to me, would be negligent to the people they insist they serve, which is the players. Pool is finally in a position of strength. More tournaments, more prize money, more visibility than ever before. Then again, it's probably not surprising that turf protection and ego surface in the face of this kind of success. The players who have put in all that time, energy, sweat, and sacrifice to reach the pinnacle of their chosen sport deserve better. Give them better.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, checks and balances is important. You don't want one group to have all the power, because sometimes even the best intentions can go off the rails there. And again, we've got a few months. Hopefully cooler heads prevail, and we get back to talking about it and figuring things out, because otherwise everybody's going to suffer a little bit.
I'd love to think that they can get back at the table at the beginning of the year when things are a little bit quieter.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
Still a lot to go here over the next 8 weeks before Mosconi Cup. What's on tap for the rest of the year?
For one, we've got the upcoming events. The Hanoi Open is going on right now. Then we've got the Predator World 8-Ball Championship, Women's World 10-Ball Championship, and Junior World 10-Ball Championship, all taking place in Austria middle of this month. That's going to be fantastic. Battle of the Bull 9-Ball Open in Virginia later this month, and the Slovenia Longoni Open in Europe. And then the end of October, beginning of November, the annual International 9-Ball Championship, which is always a fantastic event.
Yeah, and then we'll cap it off in December with the Mosconi Cup over in London.
Buckle up.
Before we wrap it up, let's take one last look at the rankings. Give everybody an update there, if you would, Mike.
Yeah, well, Josh Filler is at the top of the WPA World Rankings, which seems about right. You look through that rankings, what do you notice? There's only one American on the rankings, top 10, Jason. That's Feder Gor.
Our newest American.
Yeah, he's right up there. And then the women's rankings, Chaeyu Chow, Kelly Fisher, still 1 and 2. They've been there for quite some time. You see Allison Fisher is still in the top 10 at number 7. And Pia Filler up to number 9.
Yeah.
Good for her. She's really improved her game a lot in the past couple of years. Her coach is not bad.
That's quite the Jack and Jill team there between Josh and Pia Filler.
Then you've got the Matchroom 9-Ball rankings with Sanchez Ruiz still at the top, Shane Bamboni number 2. This is the 2-year rankings, which is why you don't see Feder at the top. Feder number 5 in this one. So, there'll be some movement in this going forward as well.
Yeah, let's see what happens here at the Hanoi Open.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
It's been a long show, a lot to talk about.
It has. So that'll do it for this episode of Billiards Digest Live. For Jason Bowman, I'm Mike Pinozzo. We thank you for joining us. Until next time, may all your shots be hangers, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon on Billiards Digest Live.